Buenos días, clase. Hoy es 9 de junio de 2021 and this is the topics we're going to see today. So we're going to keep practicing the present of the subjunctive conjugation. I'm going to make some clarifications about our class yesterday. We're going to have 2 audio activities. We're going to start practicing the subjunctive with verbs of will and influence. So we're just going to dive into our topics. Las páginas de vista son 426 y 427. If you need to have your textbook next to you, that would be also probably helpful. So how do we conjugate the subjunctive? So we talked about yesterday how to conjugate it. We talked about there are 3 steps. Paso 1 is to conjugate the verb in the yo form of the present tense. So first step, conjugate the verb in the yo form of the present tense. And if you remember how to conjugate the negative to commands, affirmative and negative usted commands, and affirmative and negative ustedes commands, is the same step of number 1. So here we have some examples. Levantarse, me levanto, comer, como, vivo, vivir, vivo. So step 1, conjugated in the yo form of the present tense. Paso 2, drop the final O. So you drop this O. So you have this, and this is your stem for the present of the subjunctive. And paso 3 is to add the present of the subjunctive endings for AR. And we saw that the AR endings are E, S, E, hemos, eis, en, ER and IR verbs. For ER and IR verbs, the endings are the same but are different from the AR ending verbs, so the endings are a, as, a, amos, ais, an. So if I want to conjugate levantarse in the present of the subjunctive, you have this stem and you add the AR endings. Me levante, te levantes, se levante, nos levantemos, os levantéis, se levanten. And you have the reflexive pronoun because levantarse is a reflexive verb. With comer and vivir you have coma, comas, coma, comamos, comáis, coman. Viva, vivas, viva, vivamos, viváis, vivan. So as you can see, the yo form and the usted, el, ella form are the same in the present of the subjunctive. So you usually, if you're talking about el or ella or ella, you have to put the subject pronoun because so people will know that you're not talking about in the yo form, right? It also depends on context in your sentences. So I have this video here. It's a very short video of 3 minutes and 45 seconds, and if you have time, I really recommend you to see it because it explains exactly these steps that we have seen about how to conjugate verbs in the present of the subjunctive. If you remember, in class we talked about that verbs with irregular yo form, like tener, hacer, conducir, will have that same irregularity in all the subject pronouns of the present of the subjunctive. So if you have the verb tener, for example, you conjugate it in the yo form of the present of the indicative, it's tengo. You drop the final O and you add the endings of the present subjunctive, which for tener is an ER ending verb, so you add tenga, tengas, tenga, tengamos, tengáis, tengan. For the verb conducir, you conjugate it in the yo form of the present of the indicative, so it's conduzco. You drop the O and you add the present the endings for the present of the subjunctive. Conducir is an IR ending verb, so you add these endings, so it will be conduzca, conduzcas, conduzca, conduzcamos, conduzcáis, conduzcan. So again, if you have time, you can watch this video just to review what we saw. I do have a correction of something I said yesterday for stem changers in the present of the subjunctive. This video here, 4 minutes, and explains it really well. I'm also going to say it here. So we saw yesterday that if you have AR or ER ending verbs, you conjugate it the same in the yo form of the present of the indicative. You drop the final O, and then you you add the present of the subjunctive endings, right? So we have, for example, cerrar, you would have in the present of the subjunctive cierre, cierres, cierre, and then in the nosotros and vosotros form, you will, as you do in the present of the indicative, you don't have that stem change. You don't have any stem change. So instead of IE, it would be just E. Cerremos, cerréis, there is no stem change. And then again, cierren. That will happen with AR and ER stem changing verbs in the present. If you want more clarification of this, please, I would suggest you to watch this video as well. And what we said yesterday is that if you have an IR ending verb like dormir, and we're going to see another example in the next slide, dormir changes into O, from O to UE, right? And usually, if you remember how to conjugate it in the present of the indicative, the nosotros and vosotros form would be the same as this one. It would stay with the O, right? But IR ending verbs in the present of the subjunctive do undergo a stem change, also in the nosotros and vosotros form. So, but instead of being a UE, it's just a U. It simplifies to an U, and that will always happen. So IR ending verbs that in the present tense of the indicative, they have a stem change from O to UE. In the present of the subjunctive, in the nosotros and vosotros form, they will have the stem change just to an U. And I'm going to show you, so this video shows you the boot, right? So usually, if you conjugate in the present of the indicative, the only subject pronouns that are affected by the stem changes are the yo form, tu form, él, ella, ella form, and ustedes, ellos, ella, ellas, y ellas form. So the nosotros and vosotros, they usually never have, that's why they say it's a boot, they never have the stem change. So that happens with AR and ER in the present of the subjunctive. But with IR ending verbs that have a stem change, the nosotros and vosotros form would all also have a stem change. The other example I wanted to show you is an IR ending verb that has a stem change from E to IE. So in the yo form, tu form, él, ella, usted form, it undergoes that stem change, right? Also in the ustedes, ellos, y ellas form. And in the nosotros and vosotros form, it does undergo a stem change, but it simplifies to an I. Instead of an IE, it will simplify to an I. So those are the stem changes you're going to have in the present of the subjunctive. We're going to do some examples. This is the same video as in the previous slide, so if you already watched it, you don't have to rewatch it again. So we also have completely irregular verbs in the present of the subjunctive, but we just have 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And here's a Quizlet if you want to keep practicing these verbs in the present of the subjunctive, right? So you can practice them through this Quizlet. This is our first exercise. So if you go to As You Learn and you click under chapter 13, capítulo 13, you'll see that you have here the presentation, the Google Slides we're currently on, but you also have here our class activity. The video is going to be posted here, the video that you are currently seeing, and here we have our first exercise. The first exercise is a conjugation exercise. So I want you to conjugate all these verbs in the present of the subjunctive, but you have to fill in every step. So you have to do paso uno and put it here. So conjugate the verb in the yo form of the present of the indicative, then drop the O like I have here in the example, and you put it here for all the verbs that you have, and then you conjugate the verb in the present of the subjunctive for an AR, ER, or IR verb according to the given subject. I'm giving you here the subject. So you have to conjugate it according to this subject I'm giving you here. And just put your answer in the next column. Okay, just pause the video and finish that activity first. Then we have also an audio activity. So you're going to listen to the following audio. It's linked here, but you also have it here, and as you learn, you just have to click play. And you have to select sí or no to indicate whether you hear a verb in the subjunctive. So you have to complete the assignment on as you learn. There are 6 sentences, and you click sí or no according to what you're hearing. So we're going to dive into the topic of the verbs of will and influence. So the verbs of will and influence are used to refer when someone wants to affect the actions or behavior of other people. When the main clause contains an expression of will or influence, the subjunctive is required in the subordinate clause after que, provided that the 2 clauses have different subjects. So here I have an example. Mi mamá quiere que yo sacuda los muebles. Mi mamá quiere, the verb of will and influence is querer. There is 2 different subjects. In the main clauses is mi mamá, and in the subordinate clause is yo, right? So this verb of will and influence, querer, is triggering the subjunctive here, the present of the subjunctive. My mother wants that I dust the furniture. If there is no change of subject, then the infinitive is used. So for example, yo quiero sacudir los muebles. Yo quiero, I want to dust the furniture. So for example, this one and the one I showed you, you would usually say it, mi mamá quiere. In English you would say my mom wants me to dust the furniture, right? But in Spanish, the structure of the sentence that you are saying is my mom wants that I dust the furniture. So it's a different sentence structure. So here's the one a picture of what you have in your book. So your main clause is where you are going to use the verb of will or influence in the usually present tense of the indicative. So you're going to say mi mamá prefiere, my mom prefers, que is the connector, yo saque la basura, that I take out the trash. So prefiere is the verb of will. There is different subject, right, in the main clause and in the subordinate clause, and the verb of will is triggering the use of the subjunctive in the subordinate clause. So when the main clause contains an expression or verb of will and influence, the subjunctive is required in the subordinate clause, provided there are different subjects, and in this case there are different subjects. Here we have a table, a list of some verbs that express will and influence. These are the most common ones. You might find another ones. I put them in colors because I want to highlight something different about them. But we're going to go one by one first. Aconsejar, to advise. You're expressing will or influence, right? When you're advising somebody to do something. Recomendar, to recommend. Sugerir, to suggest. Rogar, to beg. Pedir, to ask for. Prohibir, to forbid. Insistir, to insist. Desear, to wish or desire. Necesitar, to need. Querer, to want. And then we have these ones in purple that we usually call impersonal expressions, because as you can see, the verb is es, and that es means it is. So it is urgent that. We call it impersonal expressions because there is no subject that is performing the action. You are just saying that it is. It, who is it? We don't know. So here are some of them. Es urgente que, es malo que, es bueno que, es mejor que, es importante que, es necesario que, etc. So as you can see, these are called verbs that express will and influence because you are expressing the will of someone over somebody else, or the influence of something or someone over somebody else. Here I have some examples. As you can see, I put these verbs in yellow because these verbs are going to need indirect object pronouns. So indirect object pronouns are me, te, le, nos, os, les, right? So for example, this one, te aconsejo que, I advise you that. Aconsejar is conjugated in the yo form because you're saying I advise, and then and te is referring to you. I advise you that, and then you use the present of the subjunctive. Te aconsejo que hagas tu tarea todos los días. I advise you that you do your homework every day. So le is making reference to him, her, or them as a non-binary. Le aconsejo que estudie todos los días. I advise him, her, or them that he, she, they study every day. So you're gonna hear after the que, you're gonna use the present of the subjunctive. So te is to you, le is him, her, them, les refers to them but as more than one. So like you're making reference to more than one people. Les aconsejo a ellos o ellas o ellas. Les aconsejo a ellas. I advise them, more than one people. Les aconsejo que vayan a la playa. I advise them, or I advise them to go to the beach. I advise, what you're saying literally in Spanish, I advise that they go to the beach. I know in English you would say structure the sentence difference as I advise them to go to the beach, so you would use to go as the infinitive, but in Spanish, because there's a change of subject, you use que and the subjunctive. I just wanted to leave this example here because I wanted to show you that in all of these ones you're saying I advise, aconsejo, 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 but you obviously can conjugate this one in the other subject pronouns. So aconsejamos would mean we advise, and te is referencing you. We advise you that you study every day. Te aconsejamos que estudies todos los días. So the verb in the subjunctive would be the verb in the subordinate clause here. It's being triggered by this verb of will and influence. This verb of will and influence is going to be conjugated in the present of the indicative. All these verbs in yellow, they need these indirect object pronouns. So te aconsejo, te recomiendo, te sugiero, te ruego, te pido, te prohíbo, te insisto. Te aconsejamos, te recomendamos, te sugerimos, te rogamos, te pedimos, te prohibimos, te insistimos, and so on. They are going to use the indirect object pronouns. So we have here the next exercise, which is number 3. For all these 8 sentences, I want you to underline the verb that is triggering the subjunctive. So you're going to identify the main clause, and you're going to underline the verb that's triggering the subjunctive in the subordinate clause. Then you're going to conjugate the verb in the parentheses in the present of the subjunctive according to the given subjects I'm giving you here, right? So I'm giving you the subjects, and you have to conjugate this verb in the present of the subjunctive. Please pause the video here. In the next slide, I'm going to show you the answers. So please first pause the video and complete the exercise in As You Learn. I'm also going to give you feedback on your As You Learn assignment, so don't change your answers after you see the answers. But it's always good that you have access to what the right answers would look like. So please pause the video. I'm going to show you the answers. So the answers are, for number 1, Here you can see the verb that's underlined and the conjugation in the present of the subjunctive that should be here. Okay, and all of these verbs underlined are verbs of will and influence. As you can see, they have different subjects. The main clause and subordinate clause have different subjects. Muy bien. The next assignment, which is number 4, número 4. So you have all these sentences. You have to decide if you need the subjunctive or a verb in the infinitive. Again, when you are using the subjunctive, you need a subject in the main clause that's different, a different subject from the subordinate clause. And you need a que as a connector, the conjunction que. When you use a verb in the infinitive, you don't need any connector. So you take away the que, you drop the que out of the sentence, and the second verb goes in the infinitive because you don't have a change of subjects. So the subject of your main clause is still the same. There's no change of subjects. If you do need, so you're gonna fill here with the verb on the infinitive or the present of the subjunctive, according if you need it. And if you need the verb in the present of the subjunctive, you have to conjugate it according to the subject of that subordinate clause. So again, pause the video here because in the next slide I'm gonna show you the answers. So first work on as you learn. It doesn't matter if you have some of them incorrect. Don't change your as you learn assignment after you watch the answers. At the end of the assignment, we're gonna have I'm gonna give you feedback, and at the end of the assignment, we're gonna have a reflection practice. Okay, this will be the answers from 1 to 4 and from 5 to 8. So as you can see, when you have a verb in the infinitive, you don't have the connector or the conjunction que. You just have the verb in the infinitive and there is no change of subject. When you have the subjunctive, you have the conjunction que, the connector que. You have a different subject in the main clause. Here the subject will be it is, es. It's an impersonal expression, and the subject of the subordinate clause in this case is nosotros, right? So you can see here, es bueno que tú, es bueno ayudar. No connector que, the verb in the infinitive, two different subjects, subjunctive in the subordinate clause, conjugate according to the subject, that's tú, and here the subject is it is. So you can also check your answers here from 5 to 8. Okay, I think this is number 5. So you'll have 10 questions and I want you to answer 5 of them using the present of the subjunctive. You can choose which ones to answer. So these questions are triggering the use of the subjunctive, and what I want you to do is to answer them using the present of the subjunctive. So number 1, for example, is tu amigo no tiene planes para el próximo fin de semana. Planes are plans, so your friend doesn't have plans for next weekend. ¿Qué le aconsejas que haga? ¿Qué le aconsejas que haga? Por ejemplo, mi respuesta es le aconsejo que vaya a montar bicicleta. Le aconsejo que vaya a montar bicicleta. Número 2. Tu amiga no sabe qué película ver este próximo fin de semana. ¿Qué le recomiendas que vea? What do you recommend her to see? Le recomiendo que vea el diario de una princesa. Le recomiendo que vea el diario de una princesa. Número 3. Tu amigues o amigue, non-binary form of amigo or amiga, va a empezar a aprender español. ¿Qué le sugieres que haga? What do you suggest them to do? ¿Qué le sugieres que haga? Por ejemplo, le sugiero que estudie todos los días. Le sugiero, I suggest them to study every day. Le sugiero que estudie todos los días. Tu compañero de apartamento va a mudarse a otro lugar. ¿Qué le pides que haga antes de irse? What do you ask him to do before leaving? Por ejemplo, le pido que limpie su habitación. Le pido que limpie su habitación. ¿Qué deseas que las personas hagan para cuidar el medio ambiente? What do you desire that people do to take care of the environment? Deseo que las personas reciclen más para cuidar el medio ambiente. I desire that people recycle more to take care of the environment. 6. ¿Qué quieres que las personas hagan para evitar la extinción de animales? ¿Qué quieres que las personas hagan para evitar la extinción de animales? Un ejemplo es, quiero que las personas tengan más conciencia. Conciencia means awareness. 7. ¿Qué es necesario que las personas hagan para aprender español? ¿Qué es necesario? What is necessary that people do to learn Spanish? Es necesario que las personas aprendan vocabulario. It is necessary that people learn vocabulary. ¿Qué es importante que las personas hagan para reducir la contaminación? ¿Qué es importante que las personas hagan para reducir la contaminación? Un ejemplo, es importante que las personas reduzcan su consumo. Reducir consumo, reduzcan su consumo. Consumo is consumption. 9. Pide un deseo para una persona que conozcas. Pide un deseo, ask for a wish or desire for a person that you know. Deseo que mi familia tenga felicidad. I wish or desire that my family has happiness. ¿Qué es bueno que las personas hagan para limpiar la casa? ¿Qué es bueno que las personas hagan para limpiar la casa? Es bueno que las personas hagan su cama. It is good that people make their bed in order to have the house clean. Es bueno que las personas hagan su cama. Muy bien. So choose 5 of these 10 questions and answer them using the present of the subjunctive. Number 6 is almost the last exercise. So we have this conversation between Señor Barriga, the landlord, and Juan and Alfredo, the tenants. So you have to click here to play the audio. And you're going to answer the questions here in complete sentences. So there are just 3 questions. ¿Qué quiere el señor Barriga que los chicos hagan? ¿Qué le piden los chicos al señor Barriga? What do the kids or guys ask to el señor Barriga? Al final, at the end, ¿en qué insiste el señor Barriga? What does the señor Barriga insist on? If you don't understand the audio, you can click here and you will have the audio script. The audio script of the of this audio. So that's a resource you can use. I want you also to, this is the last activity on As You Learn, to reflect on the activities today of the present of the subjunctive. What was something interesting you learned today here? Was there something you find difficult about today's lesson here? This is important for me to know, because I'll try to clarify as much as possible. There's always going to feel hard to learn a new verb tense, so it's going to take practice, and we're going to keep practicing during the semester. This is just a reminder of the homework, las tareas. So we have the superside, new vocabulary exercises, seleccionar una invitación, and the superside, the subjunctive with verbs of will and influence. This is also a reminder to keep up with your oral journal. the topic of this week is mi tiempo libre. Y nos vemos mañana. Hasta luego.